Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scene Change. My name is Lizzy Muhammad Park. I'm the Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division and the host of Scene Change. Now, if you know anything about the Performing Arts Division, you know that we accept all blind performers, whether you're a hobbyist, a shower singer, if this is your side gig, or if you're a professional. We would love to have you. Well, today, we don't have a shower singer. We don't have a hobbyist. We don't have someone who's doing a side gig. We have a professional. She is professionally managed. She has tons of songs out. Look her up on YouTube. She is an advocate, a novelist. She's award nominated for her songwriting. She is a New York-based music artist. And let me see, I'm missing one very important piece. She is a diversity and inclusion advocate. Welcome to our show, Lachi.
Hi, Lizzy. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's kick this off. Who is Lachi, the artist?
Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to describe how I look because I thought that this was going to be visual and I got so dressed up and I think everyone should know how dressed up I got. So I'm wearing a pink shirt. I'm wearing a golden necklace with a music note on it and another one with a butterfly. I have golden, what do you call these things? Golden bracelets, which you can hear right here. And then I have pink eyeshadow and eyeliner and long black hair and red lipstick. I am a Black woman and I am sitting in my chair in my living room. So who is Lachi? I'm a loud and proud blind woman. I write songs about my experience. I write songs about empowerment, and I write songs about knowing who you are and being as strong as you can be as the boss that you were put on this earth to be. And if I know we're going to get into my journey, but I will just say that a lot of these songs started out with me attempting to empower myself because I started out as a pretty shy kid, not really knowing how and where to fit in because of my blindness and because of my vision loss. And in that solitude, I guess you'd call it, I harnessed my music. I harnessed my writing. I harnessed my love for performance. And the only time anyone would ever see me shine and sparkle was whenever I performed. And so eventually I tried to go the narrow road and get a day job and do that whole thing. But I think my spirit was just too big for the desk. And so here I am out in New York City, really doing what I can to show people, not only in the disability community, but really in the entertainment industry, that folks can really lead with what they once assumed was adversity. They can lead with it and it can just be their whole thing. It can be their platform. It can be their life. It can be what makes people listen to them, influenced by them. It can be what makes them sell whatever they need to sell, because it happened for me. And I really personally am amazed at just how my acceptance of my blindness has really brought me out. And so that's really Lachi in a nutshell. I don't know if that answers your question, but that is the answer you're getting.
That was amazing. Okay, you said like 10 things in there that I have questions about now. And this is going to throw me all off track. Okay, so
Good.
Good. Let me take a pause. First of all, I love your outfit. This is not at all visual. It's just a podcast, but we'll have to have you.
I love that.
You definitely have to come to a convention at some point and perform for us.
Oh,
And
for
that would just
sure.
be, yeah, like that. That was
I'm
just
all vaccinated up, so I'm good to go.
so okay. You said that you really sparkled. That was your time to shine. Was when you were performing. Do you remember
Yes.
your first performance?
My first ever performance, I believe, was in the third grade. Wow, no one's ever asked me this. So my first ever performance was in the third grade. I had never really played an actual piano before, and I was just hit with the random spirit because I had known of chords, and I went in front of the class and I just kind of doodled around on the piano and just played what I thought felt nice, just as a 7, 8 year old girl. And I was playing chords because I had just recently learned that. And I played for about maybe 25 seconds to 30 seconds. And I had never said a word before that in school or in class. And I played the piano. And when I was done, I remember the teacher saying something along the lines of, wow, that was really good. Have you ever played an instrument before? Have you ever played a piano before? And I was like, not really. And she immediately told my mom that I had to get into music. She called my mother and told my mother that I had to get into music. And she told her where the nearest Yamaha store was. And that was the next place my mom and I went. And so ever since then, I mean, that was the first time I got like feedback that was like, wow, you are amazing. Up to that point, you're dealing with social workers, dealing with this, dealing with that. Which school will she need to go to? Which bus will she need to get on? Because no one knew what to do with me. But in that moment, someone knew exactly what to do with me. And I mean, here I am now still doing music. So it was very impactful.
Wow. So would you say that that's where your path began? Was that day when you played those chords in front of your classroom? Or would you say that it sort of began earlier than that, kind of in your own mind? Or would you say that it began, like, did it begin later? Where would you say that, like, okay, so that was your first performance, but then what was your first
Mhm.
step on this path then? Is my next question.
Well, I mean, ever since I was about like age 4, I always knew that I liked music and I always knew that I liked creating. But this particular path, like the path to professional music, started when I I met a guitar player that was also visually impaired. Actually, he was fully blind, totally blind, and he played the guitar and I sang. And the two of us got together right after I graduated from NYU, and we just started. In fact, I don't even know if I had graduated yet, but we had started playing around town, and we eventually went down to South by Southwest to play.
Mm.
And before we went to South by Southwest, I was thinking to myself, what if I wrote to a bunch of record labels and told them we're going down to South by Southwest to play? So I did. I wrote to a bunch of record labels and I was like, don't ask me how I got your email. Just, I'm going to be playing at South by Southwest. Would love for you to come through. And funnily enough, someone came to one of our performances in just some dungy, bar. It's not like we got any real performances. We were just a couple of kids playing. And they showed up and they said, I love what you are doing. Take my card. Call me when you come back to New York. We went back to New York. I called him. It turned out he was working at a sub label under EMI. And we met. And then we met again. And then we met again. And then eventually I got signed. And so that began my path towards music as a profession, as opposed to music as a hobby.
So, because I know a little bit about your personal background, let's fill that in for the listeners because you did not start out at NYU pursuing music, did you?
So I actually started out at UNC. My dad wanted me to be. So my dad was an accountant, and he was like, "You're not going to do music. You're good at math. Plus, I am African father, so you will do math. You will do doctor. You will do." So I started out studying economics and business and management at University of North Carolina. And while I was there, I joined the Glee Club. I even started my own a cappella groups, and that really opened me up. That really allowed me to make friends and allowed me to feel confident, something I hadn't felt before. And while I was at UNC, I started playing the piano every Saturday night. And folks would eventually start conglomerating around my piano concerts every Saturday, to the point where they eventually grew into this thing called piano nights, and frat boys and like party girls would come and yell out Freebird. And it just became a very rowdy weekly thing. It's so funny. I was talking to one of my old friends from college, and we were reminiscing about it. And she was just going like, yeah, man, like, I can't believe how insane those parties got. And it was just crazy. And then finally people were like, what are you even doing here? Why aren't you pursuing music? Like, why are you in my economics class? And so I went to my guidance counselor and I was like, I want to pursue music. What do I do? And he was and I was like, I know New York is a place to go or whatever. I want to move to New York, but I want to be smart. And he was just like, no, move to New York. And so his name was Paul Cole. I need to name drop him because I talk about him in every time a podcaster or whatever asks a question. His name is Paul Cole. He's in this Beatles cover band. He was just like my favorite human being because I was like 17 or whatever. And there's just this guidance counselor who you think is just this pencil pusher. It turns out he's in a Beatles cover band at night. And he said, go for your dreams. And I moved to New York. And that was all she wrote.
So right after graduation, you moved to New York?
Yes.
So you didn't work for other jobs in between that you didn't like, where you wore skirt suits and people had the exact same reaction to you that you had to your guidance counselor? Because I know that's true because I saw it in an interview.
I worked at the where did I work? I worked for the city of New York, and I worked because so the thing was, after NYU, and here's the missing link that people don't understand because I'm a little hazy about it. While I was signed to EMI, I was working. Like,
oh, yep. I see.
And so I was trying to juggle working for the city of New York and then eventually working for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers while I was trying to tour, was trying to do shows, was doing all this stuff. And I was just having a real tough time juggling all that. And then folks at the Corps were like, what are you, like, they would come to some of my shows and then they'd see me at the desk like, wait, what? So... because I'm not, I'm not doing like open mics. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing like real shows at real venues. And so people were very confused. And it was interesting because I got to a point while I was at the Corps where it was like, I sat down with my supervisors and they were like, so here's the trajectory. Next year, you'll get this raise. And then 2 years, you'll have this raise. And then by this year, you'll be a level 8. And then you'll be a level 9 and a level 10. And that's how it works. And I was like, oh, wow, my whole life's mapped out. I have healthcare. I have PTO. I could take off enough PTO days to tour, apparently. So like, why would I ever leave this job? But I didn't have the brain space. I didn't have the passion to be able to run both. And my heart and whatever runs me, whether God, nature, I'm not sure what I believe in yet, but whatever runs me was pointing me towards music. And I had to take that leap and just say, like, I'll have to figure out healthcare. I'll have to figure out how to keep paying New York rent, how to do everything that I got to do because I have to leave this job and fully put myself into music where I belong.
Wow. I love that that story. And you're exactly right. You filled in that missing link. Cause I'm like, wait a minute, when did that happen? Like, I know she worked for the, federal government and all this.
Right.
Okay, so let's get a little bit, and it's funny. We're gonna get back to New York, but that comes like a little bit later. But you mentioned a cappella, and I am a huge fan of a cappella. And
really?
I was in a cappella in college, and it was the highlight. Yeah.
Yes, it's such a lifestyle. It really makes or breaks your college experience. It really is.
It really changes your college experience too. Like,
yes, yes, for the better.
Yeah, definitely always. And one thing that I noticed is you really have fun with your music. It's like I just want to know, what's a day in the studio like with you? You know what I mean? Walk me through it. When you show up, what happens? You know, you're doing your audio stuff. Tell me about it.
So there are several scenarios. There's either me by myself in the studio, which is how it's been since COVID, and a lot of the time, because sometimes I'll work with remote producers. There's me in just doing vocals in someone else's studio, and then there is someone else doing vocals in my studio. And no matter what the situation is, I am a very lighthearted goofball in the studio. Like, I don't care who I'm dealing with. I don't care if it's a Sony producer. I don't care if it's like some 7-year-old girl that's going to be the next big star. I will be the exact same way, because it can be grueling. There can be egos. So I love to be that person that's just having fun and kind of kicking back and allowing a 12-hour session to feel like 2 hours.
Mhm.
When I'm behind the knobs, especially my own studio, I I don't look at I don't need to look at the keys, and barely need to look at the screen, because it's not like I can really see it anyway. In fact, if I try to look at my keyboard to find a key, I would just never find it. And so I'm all about shortcuts. And it's interesting because, and I think I mentioned this all the time. People will come into my studio and go, wow, I can't believe you're able to just navigate with shortcuts and presets and all sorts of crazy little nips and tricks that you do. You are so talented, and we are so amazed. And I'm like, I'm a producer that knows how to use Pro Tools. Like, that's what a producer that knows how to use Pro Tools does. And so just because I'm not looking at the keys, and just because I'm barely looking at the screen, any good producer doesn't look at the keys and just uses shortcuts. So, but it's a lot of fun. I try to keep things light. And then in my songwriting and in my performing, same thing. I like to be cheeky. It's all a joke. Life is just one big joke that we're all in on, where it's like, come on, we're all here to just have fun and enjoy and really just be amazed by the fantastic things we can do. And so that's why I try to have that element in my music of, let's all talk about heartbreak, but I mean, this is still just a song. So let's have fun as well.
Yeah, that definitely comes through. A cappella rendition of Old Town Road, and for the dumb, you're like Tweedledum, and I was like, did you just say Tweedledum? I was dead. So, it definitely comes through.
I caught that.
the joking vibes, all of it, and I was like, this is just really cool. Can you share some of your audio production technology software secrets?
Well, I personally use Pro Tools, and I like Pro Tools because it has a much smaller learning curve than some of the other ones out there. And it is the universal software that most folks use. A lot of folks also use Logic, but Pro Tools is a little more universal. Pro Tools works with a lot of software, like a lot of different accessible software. And for me, a lot of the tricks and tips that I do is I do all of the keyboard shortcuts. So any keyboard shortcut that I can either is pre-made or that I can make myself, I am all about keyboard shortcuts. I'm also all about presets. So if there's a way you can preset the exact type of track you would like for a bass instrument, with the specific kind of EQ you would like on it, any kind of compression that you would already want to put, especially if you already want to put, any kind of effects that you want to put, and any kind of automation that you want to have for the track, preset a lot of those, so that you don't have to keep starting it up and trying to find everything. And it's a pain in the butt to make all of your presets, but it's the most worth it thing. Another thing that I really encourage folks to do is obviously to label all of your tracks, label the sections and the areas of your tracks. Let's say, for instance, the chorus, the pre-chorus, the verse, things of that nature. I mean, these are all very simple sort of novice tips that I'm giving, because I'm not here to really get into manual basics, but there are just a lot of really simple things that can make your life a lot easier. And I think that automation is a blind person's friend. As much things as you can just push a button and then everything just happens and you know it will, is really helpful. And so I suggest automate as much as you can, create your own keyboard shortcuts as much as you can, and trust your creations, trust the keyboard shortcuts that you make, trust all the little things that you make, and use them in other applications as well. So just like everything is Control C, Control Copy for everywhere you go, do that with the other shortcuts that you create so that you always know exactly what you're doing. And then always, if you can, when you go to a session, someone else's session, do what you can to bring your own version of the session so that you can navigate it and you know where everything is. That's what I try to do myself.
Now you mentioned something that segue. You're doing a great job just segueing into my next questions. So
I have all your notes.
Yeah, right. You segue perfectly into my next question, which is about low expectations and injustice. You kind of mentioned how people just walk in, they're like, "Oh, you're doing all these things without looking," and you're like,
Right.
"Well, yeah, because I'm a boss and like I know what I'm doing." You know what I mean? But that's not because I'm like, don't be amazed because I'm blind. Be amazed because I'm doing like I'm
Right.
me. You know.
Right.
So I want to know, like, what was your first feeling of injustice? I would imagine that as an advocate, you faced some sort of injustice that made you want to, work towards equality or, raise awareness and different things like that. So if it's not your first one, just one that really stands out to you in your memory.
One that actually stands out to me, and I'm not going to name any names.
Of course not.
But while I was working at the federal government, there was a point in time where, so because my parents came as immigrants and because I lived in neighborhoods with not a lot of people that look like me, and I went to schools with not a lot of people who look like me, I was almost spoiled by a false sense of white privilege. And especially with the fact that I have low vision, I'm not saying I was literally colorblind, if that makes sense. Like, I could see enough to see what people look like, but at the same time, it's not like I'm thinking, oh, this is a white person, I need to behave a certain way, or this is a black person, I need to behave a certain way. I didn't have that mechanism. And when I got to working for the federal government, there was just one incident that really made me think, oh, I'm black and I can't do certain things because of that. I just remember my supervisor had asked me to do a certain task. And he asked me around 4:30, and I didn't like what he asked me to do. It was like some kind of envelope stuffing thing. And I thought I was too good for it, but I said, okay, whatever. So I was doing it and did it and completed it. But I was kind of taking my sweet time, and I assumed he would leave at 5, but he didn't. And he stuck around and stuck around and stuck around till I finished at about like 5:30. And I was like, okay, well, I'm done now. So I turned it into him and I said, signed, sealed, delivered, with a smirk, because that's how, I'm always joking. Like, it just never ends. But he was like, are you getting an attitude with me?
Oh.
And I thought to myself, I stood there wide-eyed for a second. And I was just like, no, huh. And then the next day, I went to deliver a different envelope to another woman on a different floor. And when I went back to my desk, I was called into the office, and they told me that that woman on that different floor said that I walked in angrily and just dumped the folder on her desk and left, when to my view, I had walked in just like my regular self. And that's when I realized, and I know that it's very sort of small little instances, but those two instances, maybe because they happened back to back, reminded me, like, not only am I Black, but I'm a Black woman. And Black women are seen as aggressive regardless as to their facial expression, regardless as to their bodily stances and their gestures, no matter what, because society has these sort of glasses on that say when you see a Black woman, no matter what she does, she's being aggressive. It could be taken positively of like, oh, she's a boss, oh, she's dope, she's awesome. But at the same time, it's also equally taken as, wow, she's obviously coming at me when she most likely isn't. So that instance made me realize like, wow, I need to really figure out what's going on, because as a blind person, I get in trouble. This is going to be a little convoluted, but as someone who's low vision, I get in trouble a lot for doing things like not waving back, or right, or and even to people who like know 100% that I'm lost. And then I get in trouble for things like giving a weird look or a side eye when I'm like, A, can't see you anyway, and B, I personally ascribe a bit of that to race and to gender, like to the fact that I'm also a Black female. Now that could be my own personal thing, but that's my answer.
Are you a cane user?
I only use it at night.
Yeah, that means no. Okay, so and I'm kidding, but
yeah.
Okay, so that's.
But no, let me tell you something right now. And I don't know if you're gonna like this or not, but one of my favorite things to do is to put, and I'm still trying to get this right, but is to put on my heels, like my little sexy, ridiculous heels, put on my little tight, whatever outfit, walk around at night with my cane because I can't see if people are staring at me. I can't see and I'm just like, yeah, what? Dive out the way. Thank you.
It does make life easier, honestly, sometimes. What was I going to say? So it's fascinating because I always talk about this, but I haven't really had a conversation with anyone about it. I always talk about how, okay, so if you're a white woman, you're going to be stereotyped as a woman. If you are a Black woman, you're going to be stereotyped as a Black person. If you are a blind Black woman, and it's obvious to other people, you're going to be stereotyped as a blind person. So it's like you always get stereotyped as the lesser known of your minority identities, which is totally not. Yeah. And I was, as you were talking, I was thinking, they don't know she's blind because they keep treating her like a Black woman and not like a blind woman. Not that either of them is right or fair or good, because we should all be treated equally. But I could tell because I don't know, I just like the way that they were stereotyping you, the way they were treating you. I was like, these microaggressions are coming from that place. And it was just, I was just so fascinated, like, as you were telling all these stories.
Well, and it's in response to that too. Like I had during my time working there, I had difficulty figuring out how to advocate for myself, especially in terms of being blind, just because it was invisible, right? It was non-visible. So instead of them, social model versus medical model, right? So instead of them sort of seeing that I needed help or had issues because of my blindness, they took it as other things. That spiraled into me feeling some type of way, which then spiraled into them reacting to it, which then gave me even more pause of advocating for myself. I mean, we all know the spiral.
Yeah. No, that's so real because I always wondered about, so I always feel the same way because I am someone who has, the same minority status as you, Black, blind, female. And I get stereotyped as a blind person because I have a guide dog, I use my cane, all these different things. So because of that, I'm always treated as a blind person first, which comes with certain perks because I don't, sometimes I get the attitude comments, but that's rare. I usually get the, oh, wow, you're actually, like intelligent, or like, oh, wow, you know what I mean? I get more of that, which is just as infuriating, but just in a different way. You know what I mean? So it was fascinating to hear that. Okay. So back to my original questions.
That was a whole parenthesis.
That was a whole parenthesis. So are these instances that you mentioned sort of the things that made you want to become an advocate, or was it something different?
what made me want to become an advocate is trifold.
Mhm.
So firstly, while working at the Corps, actually during one of my last years, I had been diagnosed with a very rapidly growing keratoconus. I'd had high drops and a lot of other complications that came onto my eye stage. And I started to realize that like I'm I'm going to get to a point where I can't play it off anymore.
Mhm.
And I have to not only advocate for myself, but I have to advocate for other folks who are in my position and are not able to. And another thing that kind of gave me a really big push to go into advocacy was, you know, my I when I was younger, there just wasn't folks out there like me,
Mhm.
right? There were black singers, there were female actresses, and there were there were Ray Charleses and Stevie Wonders, but none of those relate to me. Like I wasn't there. I didn't see myself. And so if I'm not going to see that person, I may as well be that woman. And that thought came into my head after sitting down with my previous manager, Gary Salzman. He had told me, he's said, why do you keep your condition from the public? Why don't you talk about it? Why don't you celebrate it? He didn't really say it in an empowering way. I think he was more inquisitive.
Mhm.
And my response was when I had first been signed to one of the record labels of yore, that was what all they wanted to do was sort of gimmick it and sort of shtick it. So
Mhm.
I didn't like that. And he said, you know what? I am motivated by you. I'm empowered by you. And, I am a well-off, older Jewish man. And you empower me, you inspire me. So why don't you go out and do that for others who really could use someone like you so that they can kind of go on their paths the way you went on your path. And that got me to thinking like I didn't have someone out there to do this for me, and I want to be out there doing this work for someone to turn on YouTube and go, oh wow, we have little white kids going, I want to be what? Neil Armstrong. We have little black boys saying, I want to be Michael Jordan or whoever,
Mhm.
LeBron James. But I don't want the little black girl with a disability to just say, I don't know.
Mhm.
And so that's why I'm out here doing this.
So you mentioned that you didn't have, someone who looked just like you. So who did you look up to then? Hmm.
My biggest influences were Lauryn Hill. I was a
Yes.
huge Fugees fan, and Lauryn
Hmm.
Hill, just everything about her, just the music, the acting. I was all about Lauryn Hill. I was a big Alicia Keys fan because I played the keys myself, and I was just very excited that there was a black girl being successful playing the keys and really doing it. Um, and I was also a huge Erica Badu fan, but I also listened to Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin. My mom wanted me to be a virtuoso pianist or something of that nature when I was much younger, so she got me all of those, and I loved diving into that. But then also living in Ithaca, I listened to a lot of 90s and late 90s early aughts or whatever whenever I was in middle school or whatever, just grunge, like rock or whatever. So, you know, good
So you kind of
times.
got your musical inspiration from all those areas, which really does kind of explain because when people listen to your music, you can look Lachi up on YouTube. You have a lot of different stuff. So your main thing is EDM right now. We're not going to talk about it just yet because I have a different question about it. But you
Okay.
also have these like really slow, like ballad type songs too. So like, it's really clear that you have like a lot of different inspirations because we really can't box you in to just one area. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know. Is
Right.
that fair to say? That's what it felt like to me when I was
I
listening.
mean, it's kind of a progression. So
Hmm.
if you kind of follow along, you'll find that not only am I tone of voice, but also in my lyrics and in the power that I sing my phrases and stuff like that, that I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
grown musically and in all sorts of other ways. But it kind of starts out a little more ballady and then transforms into eventual sort of, I guess, badass pop EDM or whatever you
Mm-hmm.
want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really just a reflection of my own growth.
That's cool. So tell us more specifically about your advocacy work. I know you've done some stuff with the UN. You know, I'm interested in that. It's my background. You've done some benefit concerts. Tell us, like, what are you doing as a performing advocate?
You know, I I really love incorporating music into my advocacy because what I'm really ultimately trying to do is focus my advocacy into representation in the media, specifically music, because we don't have any. I was about to say we don't have enough, but we really don't have any. We don't have any folks going out there advocating for accessible venues, for accessible, Pro Tools systems, digital audio workstations. And while they are working on a lot of things and everyone is aware of it, there really isn't a body going hard to put the force to the fire in a major way. So that's definitely something I'm interested in focusing on as I forge my path. But as I go along, I really love incorporating music into my advocacy. I love to speak. Obviously, I love to talk. I have so many ideas to share. But I think that it kind of really brings it home. Like, you get to know me, Lachi, as a person most through me performing for you. I mean, I'm here talking to you, uh, but how do I even? This is about to be me about to get real. But like, when I'm talking to people about my advocacy or about anything, there's still a level of separation. I think there's like a guarding, in a sense, and I don't want to use the word guard, like a protection that I can't help but put there when I speak, when I interact, and that all comes tumbling down when I perform. And so you get exactly what I meant. You get the real me. And so I love to incorporate my music into all of my live performances, into as many of my messages as possible, so that people can feel the genuineness and the authenticity that you just aren't going to get unless you have me at my most divine. And that's when I'm performing.
It's because you want people to feel what you're saying and feel what you mean and not think about what you're saying. Like, you want it to be an energy, you want it to be a
Exactly.
feeling and not logic. Is that right? Okay. That's what I thought.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And you said that you are interested in advocating for more accessible spaces. Well, I think you would be a prime, person to come and join the performing arts division, because that's what we do. I love what you said about authentic representation. That's what we're working on too. You do it specifically in music. We do it for all the performing arts, just because we're not, like, it's just a
Uh-huh.
performing arts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like, but it's that's exactly what we need. And we need someone who is, a professional who's doing this as a full-time thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
And who's really pushing for um accessibility in a really major way. So, I mean, we do a lot of like congressional type of advocacy type
Yeah.
stuff in the NFB. Just because if it's a law, then people have to follow it. Well, ideally.
Exactly.
So
Ideally.
that's definitely something that I know our listeners are going to be so glad to hear you say. But I want to get back into, you were talking about feeling a little bit guarded when you talk about disability. And I want to delve deeper into that. That's fascinating. And the reason why I'm fascinated by it is because um we were talking sorry, we weren't talking. I wasn't actually in the room. I was just watching it. You were
Mm-hmm.
talking about how you've struggled in the past with self-acceptance and feeling confident in blindness. And this was in a different interview. And I was just wondering, if that's changed, how that's changed. Take us through that a little bit, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. Well, firstly, I will say that the comment of being a little self-protective
Yeah.
is just, I think, a more natural, sort of universal feel. Like, there's you when you speak to others. There's the you when you speak to yourself. There's the you when you speak to your mother. They're all sort of different, slightly different yous. And then there is some sort of core you, but there is sort of an extra layer of you when you're interacting with people. And when I perform, all of those extra layers come down and you're just getting the core me. So that's what I meant by that. But in terms of the fact that like I used to have issues with advocacy, self-advocacy, self-acceptance, disclosure when it came to my blindness because I could sort of get away with it. You know, in the music industry, it's rough because it's not really a place where there's public advocacy like that. Like, let's say, for instance, in entertainment, we can see public advocacy, namely because it is a very visual medium. So we'll see folks saying we need more people in wheelchairs in movies and in films, or we need people to authentically play roles and things like that. But like, let's say, for instance, in the music industry, I would walk into a room with a big Sony exec or with a big Universal guy, and I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. I didn't want them to feel sorry. I just wanted them to see me for the talented young woman I was, as opposed to either feeling weirded out or either feeling, you know, inspiration porny, you know? So I, I would keep it hidden. And the problem with that is that not only were people just wondering what was wrong with me anyway, still, which then, as I mentioned earlier, spiraled into weird other things. But also, I just couldn't do my work. I just couldn't do anything because I couldn't see anything. I'm trying to pretend I could see. So, you know, it was tough because I was always legally blind. And I was always having these weird issues of skirting the line of trying to advocate, but hoping they believe me, or maybe they think I'm acting up, or should I just not say anything at all? And so that sort of turmoil from at a young age just kind of grew with me as I grew. And I finally had to just put a stop to it and go, you know what? This is going a little too far. And I know that sometimes when you finally kind of confront your inner child and go, all right, we're going to have you sit in a corner for a second. It's a rough change because you have to figure out how to do that and remain self-confident and just not approach things insecurely while battling your insecurities. So it took me a while to sort of dive and delve into a much healthier self-advocacy. And the way I advocate is I just stand in front of it. I walk into a room and I say, "Hi, I'm blind. How are you?" Or I'll say just things like that, because let's keep it fun. Let's keep it light. I don't want it to be awkward when I say, by the way, I need this and that. We're all on an adult, positive, fun joke that we're all in on and we all love it. So if I walk up to you and say, "Hi, I'm blind. How are you?" And then later on I go, "Hey, can you help me pick out, something, help me pick out something from maybe a buffet." It's like, "Oh, okay, I get it," as opposed to, "Are you weak? Can you not do it yourself?" Or, "Oh, it's nothing like that. We're all in on this together. We're intelligent adults. This is what I need. Will you be able to help me with it?"
So has it worked in, I don't want to say combating. That sounds like it's too strong of like the way, like your style is not to combat it. Your style is to like, I don't know. Does it work in getting rid of the weird vibes? You know what I mean? Like not like,
It's scene setting, if that makes sense. It sort of sets the tone. So I'm here to sort of set the tone of, hey, I am strong enough to put my adversity out there, if that makes sense. I'm looking at my adversity as strength. So do that with me. It's basically how it presents. And folks do it. It very rarely misfires or missteps. There have been times where I'll meet someone like 3 different times at the same event. And little things like that.
Been there.
It'll be like weird. Hi again. Hello again. But It's rough though, because I am also very stubborn and I'm hard on myself. So I'll go to events all by myself with no guide, with no help, and I'll just put myself through it because whatever, let's do this. Let's just have fun and let's make it work. And I do appreciate anyone who does make sure that they always have someone with them and make sure of that, because it is like overkill on my part. But I sort of force the extrovertedness because it just, I don't know,
It
makes for
works for
good TV.
you.
So
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it works for you. And also like, I mean, I don't personally, like, I don't see anything wrong with, pushing yourself as long as, you're fine with it. And there's nothing wrong with stepping outside of your comfort zone either.
yes.
For people who do want to just go for it and just try it out. I'm glad that you're sharing that it's possible and that it's doable to go to these different events and venues and meet with people
Mhm.
independently, because there are times when maybe someone wants a guy to go with them, but no one wants to go with them or no one can.
Exactly.
And they shouldn't, let those times stop them either. So it's good practice for sure.
Yes.
So would you say that the field is like relative for a blind person? Oh, and by the way, because I did not mention this. So um in the federation, we pretty much consider, if you have any sort of a visual disability, we consider everyone blind, just because it's more inclusive that way. And
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be weird. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, this person has more vision, so they can babysit everyone. Like, no, like we're all blind and we're all
Right.
positive about it.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if,
Mhm.
someone's whatever,
Right.
high partial,
Right.
low vision, blah, 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 like whatever. We just say like we're all blind. Um, so as a, I forget what my original question was now, but as a I remember, as a blind performer in the music scene, do you find it pretty accessible, or what are the inaccessibilities and how have you been able to work around them?
Well, the music scene is pretty inaccessible in the sense of, if we're going to talk about brick and mortar, I don't have actual numbers for you. In fact, I know that my manager at Harborside, Ben Price, is actually working on a full out sort of study with K Arts Council on this very topic.
Mm.
But a lot of venues are not fully accessible in terms of their sort of brick and mortar facades. They don't have, and we're not just talking ramps, we're talking railings, we're talking accessible bathrooms, we're talking elevators to get to a second floor mezzanine situation or whatever. And all sorts of other physical things that a lot of venues don't have. So that's number one. And just ways to get to the stage as well. And then we also find that while a lot of venues are well-meaning, they find themselves afraid to attempt to be accommodating when these requests are made. So say, for instance, someone says, okay, I would love to perform at your venue. Will you provide a ramp? And they'll either say yes, and then when the performer gets there, there's either no ramp or a ramp that won't work. And they go, well, we provided a ramp. Or they'll just say no in the first place because they'll say it's too hard. Another another inaccessible situation are software. So a lot of software is doing better with integrating with things like voiceover, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of software out there that does not include these does not include accessibility natively when
Mhm.
universally designing their application or their platform. I do know that there's a lot of gripes about DJ software, about DJ phoneware. So a lot of DJs actually DJ from their phone, but a lot of the apps are inaccessible. And a lot of DJs that a lot of blind folks that want to get into DJing say, how do I DJ as a blind person when a lot of the racks are not accessible? And then people will say, oh, just buy a bunch of vinyl, like somebody has $10,000 sitting around to buy a ton of vinyl. And no one makes vinyl anymore anyway. So I mean, a lot of people are making vinyl, but like no one has the money for that. So um so there's a lot of places where music is inaccessible. And then of course, I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention the fact that just the stigma is huge.
Mhm.
People people assume you're going to be some sort of struggling on the corner musician, sort of with a guitar with only 4 strings, just trying to make ends meet if you're a musician with a disability. Meanwhile, some of the greatest musicians I've met have some form of disability, whether they have, and I'm not going to out anyone, never, but there are just some folks that I know that have confided that they have different situations, different neurodiversities, different, spectrum on different spots on the spectrum. And they're not here to disclose it because the music industry has such a stigma. The music industry is old school. I mean, especially at sort of when you're at the smaller circles kind of level, it's old school. It's all who you know. It's all who were you signed with, who produced your album, who do you know, who did you shake hands with, were you at that party? And because it's so old school like that, old school stigmas still survive. And those old school stigmas still branch out as much as people want to be, again, well-intentioned, as much as people want to be #woke. those stigmas are still loud and true and proud. People are just being quieter about them. But in these rooms, in these back rooms where the hands are still being, shaked and where the deals are still being made, those biases are still there. So I'm out here to try to bust some of those up and to say, hey, you know what? I'm not afraid. I'm going to be that one. I'm going to be that one that's loud and says, I'm blind. And still just kind of walks into the room and gets things done on behalf of other folks with disabilities.
I would imagine too that another stigma that especially female music artists with disabilities face is that it's all about like sex appeal, right? And like, ooh, like you gotta like, especially if you're in like a more like pop type of a situation, and people don't view like the stereotype is that people, with disabilities they're infantilized, so they're not viewed as sexual because it's like you can't think that way about a blind person, like, you know what I mean? So I also wonder, like, is that part of it too?
I have a complicated relationship with that question, but because as someone who is blind and as someone who was sort of a tomboy growing up and as someone who had all sorts of identity situations going on, right. Looks were not my biggest thing that I was concerned about. And in fact, I was kind of anti beautification while I was kind of coming up, because I was like, you either like my music or you don't. You got to love me for me or screw you. And I eventually began to start working on my looks. Mm-hmm. Now, I started working on my looks and really trying to shape the way I present myself, because I wasn't happy with the response I was getting from the industry. And so I didn't do much. I, started doing my nails a bit, doing my like eyebrows, lipstick, just nothing. I haven't used a tutorial yet. You know what I mean? I'm just doing a little thing. And then when I would walk around, I would start getting more positive notice. I would start being listened to in the room. And so that's bad. That's not a good thing. Why does it, just because I just spruced myself up just a little bit, I start getting positive recognition. I start getting things, but unfortunately that was the case. And as a result, my confidence was boosted. And so as my confidence boosted, I began to more on my presentation. And as I focused more on it, I got more positive response. And then I grew even more confident. And now, as you can see, I spent 2 hours looking dope as hell. Ain't nobody looking at me right now. and I do that. I do Lachi days. In fact, oh my God, let me tell you this. So like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or something, somebody went on my Instagram and they were like, you're not real because all your pictures are of you in like dope makeup and looking like that. Don't nobody do that every day. That's not real. I was like, you know what? I sat there and I thought I was going to do this for the rest of my life. But for the next 14 days, I dressed up head to toe in like evening wear regalia,
Oh my
full
goodness.
makeup, and did the whole thing and documented it on TikTok. I just everything every day. And I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life for that troll who probably wasn't even real and is not following this. But it was so empowering. Just getting dressed up for myself is empowering. Now, to your question, which I hadn't answered yet, it's kind of like I recognize it, you know, because of my idiosyncrasies and my weirdnesses, on top of the fact that I wasn't taking care of just my presentation in that way. Yeah, people were infantilizing my situation, infantilizing me, infantilizing this and that. And I have been criticized for like, oh, you know, you kind of, you know, gave in to sexuality and now you're doing all this beautification and you're having all these sort of hot photos. And I'm like, thank you. But but it's not like I explained to you. I mean, it's a lot more of a convoluted case, and it's, again, I recognize that it's not the greatest thing that, you know, just the shallowness of looks showers you with positive reinforcement, which can then in turn up your confidence. But look, if the tools are given, I say take them, use them. And I did, and I'm here now because of it. And I think that I like using it to my advantage because I am look at me, I'm just going to say it. I am a good looking woman, right? Like I am hot. And like I walk into these places and you can't, that factor is already gone. So when I walk in and I go like, oh, I'm blind, sit down and listen, then what do you know, the infantilization that comes with them going like, well, there's no way we can see her as sexy or anything like that is kind of gone. One of the biggest gripes, and I've been speaking to musicians all across the nation and really internationally, just trying to get a feel for what their problems are when it comes to the music industry and when it comes to sort of the backside of the music industry, not just performing. And their biggest gripe is that whenever they actually finally land that meeting with that agent or that big meeting with that record label, the first thing they say is, we have no idea how we're going to market this. We don't know who the market is. And we also don't know how to market your image in a way that we think we can sell it. And so I've been telling people that, and my response to that is, I used my music, my cheekiness to get myself feeling confident. And I think that all you need to do is figure out what makes you radiate that sort of infectious confidence. People want to feel confident. People want to be around boldness and confidence. And people, they don't care what you look like at that point, what you do, what you are. Somebody gave the perfect example. You could be like I don't want to offend anybody, but you could just be just the squat, you know, just rowdy, loud, like, you know, beer drunk breath guy and an elevator, and a beautiful woman walks in, and you have the confidence to still go, you know, like, hello, love, you know, because you're just so confident. It doesn't matter what you look like or anything. And so, you know, radiating that confidence, no matter what it is, whether it's just being really good at something, being well-spoken, you know, whether it's just wearing a jacket that makes you feel awesome, just find it and use it, because you can still walk into that same record label and just radiating that beaming energy, and they'll know where to put you. Because really, they want a big personality. So they'll know where to put you as long as you can find your confidence. And
can confidence be faked? Some people say fake it till you make it. Can confidence be faked?
Confidence can't be faked. Confidence is a real thing. What you can do is you can there are other things, like there's conceit, you know, there's an insecurity. There are things like that. Now you the reason why I say you can't really fake confidence is because you can't fake insecurity. That's one thing you cannot hide. And, you know, we all have these, mirror neurons or whatever they call them in our brains, where if someone's sad, you get a little sad, or and when someone's feeling insecure, you get a little insecure. And if they're sitting there showcasing confidence, but they're actually insecure, you will feel that insecurity, even if you don't see it, even if it's not being presented. You can just feel that energy seeping through the little nooks and crannies in their words, or in their inflections, or in their body movement, or whatever. And there's just insecurity cannot be hidden. And so, and that's why I say you really can't fake it.
I believe the same thing. I was just curious what you thought. I think it's secretly obvious. Like it's obvious that you're trying to cover something up that is very blatant.
Right.
So, wow, you talk a lot about being bold, being confident, and your music really speaks to that. You have a lot of empowering bops. That's what I call them.
Power bops. Okay, I got
That's
you.
right. That's right. So what's your hope for the future? As far as, because you'll be talking about something, like you said, that's relevant to you, but then you kind of put it to this, like, I don't know, David gonna do a leap of beat, and then it just sounds way different than if somebody else had done it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like you're pumping people up, you're inspiring them, you're motivating them, you're getting them going, but you're not doing it in like this like sad way. You're doing it in a way that like something we hear on the radio. Like, you know what I mean? So what do you see as the future of inclusion? Is that what you're thinking? Are you just make well, I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. I'll just ask you the question and I'll let you take it away.
Well, that was a very sort of peanut butter spread question where there was no like actual question mark. But what I'll say is, I mean, one of the things I really like to do is, first of all, when we sing empowering music, when we do empowering music, it doesn't have to be sappy. It doesn't have to be, man in the mirror, we are the world. What's the point of making music if no one is going to be able to really get their heart pumping to it? That's sort of my philosophy. And I am on a mission really to release songs that people who do not have a disability, who don't work for a organization or a foundation. I mean, just your average Joe can listen to and go, wow, that's me. Like, I felt empowered by that song. Not every song needs to have a UNICEF donation button tied to it. Like, let's just have fun and party. Because when you allow people to relate to you, then people start to accept, right? So when we look at like the LGBT movement, everybody started saying, I got a gay cousin. You know what I'm saying? And so when we start getting people to see folks with disabilities as, oh, well, I have a this and that. So, and he's fine. So obviously everybody else is fine. Like, why am I acting like it's not fine? And things like that happen when you start to see folks out here doing the same things as non-disabled folks. So I'm out here trying to put out bop music in a major way and not looking at my other non-disabled singer-songwriters and vocalists as competition, but colleagues. They're no better, they're no worse. They're not bad people for not being empowering or for the messages that they send, but they're not better people because of where they are in their careers. So I just think that if we're able to sort of lift up folks that are able to get to the same sort of levels as non-disabled counterparts, then we'll really start seeing some change and some turnaround. The problem, Lizzy, is I am tired of people thinking I am some kind of exception. I'm done with that. It's like, well, you're the only one that, it's like, that is the most untrue. There's a whole community. What are you talking about? In fact, 25% of every fourth freaking person you walk across or that you come to has some form of disability. Are you kidding me? 61 million in just America alone. And everyone says they don't see one or they don't know anyone. And I just want less exceptions. And once we start getting less exceptions, then all of a sudden it's just part of culture.
I totally agree with that. And okay, so we've been going on this empower trip. And I love it. But I want you to tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got here. So you went to NYU. I understand that there was a apply and reapply situation. I want to know about the apply and reapply and how did you keep going? Because I'm sure there are so many people who said, well, maybe this won't work out. Maybe you should just keep working for the federal government. Maybe. So what in you, or I don't know, around you or whatever, what pushed you? What kept you going? What stopped you from giving up?
Um, I cannot answer that question with words.
Mm.
I believe that it is just an innate part of my being. And the only reason I say that is because as you were asking the question, I started going through my life and my history and trying to figure out when was the first time I tried to do something and couldn't do it and then got back up and did it again. And I kept going back and back and back. And I think it just all boiled down to just generally not wanting to be underestimated because of my blindness and just always wanting to sort of say, I can do it. So I used to always live in this place of I can do it despite my blindness. You can say what you want to say, but I can do it despite the fact that I'm blind. And then like, let's say, for instance, getting into the school play, I didn't get in, but then I got into being one of the techs. But then I was like the best tech, and eventually got an award for being that, And so it's always like, well, if you're not going to get me this way, you're going to get me that way. You're not going to. And then it was always, well, despite this, I am going to, still achieve. And I remember when I got my rejection letter from NYU, and I was just like, okay, well, despite that, I'm going to get into NYU. And everything was always sort of against me. Like moving to New York, my parents were super against it. It was a huge fight. I had no money. They weren't going to back me up because they didn't want me to go. I didn't have a place to stay, but despite that, I went. And it all just kind of or the story I told you earlier, my friend and I went down to South by Southwest, and we didn't have any connections, but despite that, we wrote to a ton of record labels and things of that nature. But my trip has changed. My despite trip has changed in such a beautiful, perfect way. Because I did so many things and I lived that life. I was living that despite life that all started from, well, despite my blindness, I can do it. But I'm now on this beautiful trip where everything I do is because of my blindness.
Ooh.
All of the success I have is because of my blindness. The rooms I've been in is because of my blindness. I'm speaking to you because of my blindness. True. I've met the most amazing people. I got to talk to situations like, the National Foundation of the Arts and all these things because of my blindness, not despite. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful paradigm shift that I am embracing every moment of.
Wow. That's going to be the last question because we're not going to get better than that for the last question.
Yeah. Gem droppers.
This has to be one of the, I feel like I say this recently. I feel like recently we've been having some really good interviews. And I do feel like each month is just getting better and better, but I'm just going to say it on air and everything. This has been one of the most fun interviews that we've had.
We
really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What? Yes, of course. Feel free. Come back anytime. We consider you a friend of the show. So thank you, Lachi. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Precious, Caitlin, to the whole team. Everyone listening, subscribe. Lachi, do you want to give them your TikTok, your YouTube?
Yeah,
what's all your stuff?
For sure. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Clubhouse, Everything is at Lachi Music. That's LACHIMUSIC. Or you can log onto my website for updates at lachimusic.com. I am running a YouTube series called Offbeat, where I'm documenting my journey from low vision to no vision. We're having a whole lot of fun, and a bunch of fun, amazing guests have been coming through. So please check that out at youtube.com/Lachi Music. Otherwise, just find me. I'm everywhere. I'm in your comments. I'm in your DM. Like, you don't even know. Like, I'm all over your shit. Oop, hey, sorry. I'm all over your stuff.
We're definitely keeping that. Join Lachi. Join Lachi for an empower trip, some power bops. She is a good boss and a bad chick. That's all we got to say. Scene change, episode done.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Chris Nussbaum, Seyoon Choi, and Precious Perez, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.